Hello and welcome to the TechBytes audiocast. My name's Tim and I'm from the TechBytes blogazine, and with me is Dr. Roy Shestowitz from the TechBytes website.
It's Friday night and I'm gonna get sauce. I fought the troll and the troll lost. I fought the troll and the troll lost. He tried to boss me and was out-bossed. I fought the troll and the troll lost. I fought the troll and the troll lost. Underneath his creeper bridge, hoping goats will cross. Quoting Ashcroft and Tom Ridge.
Hello and welcome to TechBytes audiocast episode 41 for Sunday, April the 24th, 2011. I'm Tim, I'm here with Gordon and Roy, and we've got a special guest today, Rusty. He's from the show That Sucks on the YouTube, and we'll be talking a little bit more about that later when you've heard a few of Rusty's opinions and his input into our conversations. So without further ado, we'll go straight over to Roy, who usually kicks us off with the first topic of the day. And Roy, I hope you've got something for us. Go for it.
Yeah, I'm very pleased we have a new person on the show. And we hopefully will be on future shows as well if he's willing and eager to do so. One of the issues he brought up, which I think is very important to cover, is the lawsuit against the Android phone from Samsung. Or it's probably not just phones, it's probably more like tablets, but it's against the Android platform, or at least the form factor as well. And they also claim things to do with design and trademarks and whatever. And that's coming from Apple. So, of course, we did cover the fact that Apple and Microsoft both have this new fetish for patents and trying to exclude the competition or trying to elevate the price of the competition using patents. So I was thinking perhaps we should deal with this issue first, and whoever wants to go first.
Well, I would say over to Rusty if he would like to make a few starting comments since he's our guest today.
I don't know where y'all's stance on this is, but I kind of think it's, regardless of where you stand on the whole patent issue, I think it's very stupid of Apple to be doing this against Samsung, because it literally is the same thing Apple did against Microsoft back in the 80s. They're suing one of their primary suppliers, except it's 10 times worse, because in this case it's a hardware supplier and Apple's a hardware company. I mean, Samsung makes the screens for their iMacs, they make the chips for their mobile tablets and slates. They supply a good chunk of the hardware that Apple's, selling and self-pitching right now as being that much better. Hell, they're buying so many of the Samsung chips that they're actually driving the price of Samsung goods up for the few chips that are left over for aftermarket and Samsung devices themselves, and Samsung's happy to let them do that, but if Apple's going to sue them over something that's basically, oh, your widget looks like our widget, I don't see that ending well for Apple.
Yeah, of course, Samsung's got lots of patents, actually. I personally don't like Samsung ever since they agreed to pay Microsoft for Linux in 2007. So I had an initiative, in fact, calling people not to buy anything from Samsung as a matter of principle back then. But Samsung did lots of patents. I think Samsung's like the second biggest patent holder in Europe after IBM. And of course, they can have like hardware patents. So even the Europe does not accept software patents. Samsung got lots of things it can sue Apple with, and in fact, it already has. So I think that's just because of Easter. Lots of people haven't heard the news, but Samsung is basically suing Apple now. And I don't.
Like you're saying, it's not like when they sued HTC, who basically had no patents over the same thing. This really is a case of mutually assured destruction.
The odd thing here is that Apple. I mean, I never knew what parts Apple used in their stuff, because that's one of the things they do like to keep very sort of hush hush. And Sony apparently leaked the fact that the next iPhone's got a 5-megapixel camera or something. And the only reason they know is because they're making the cameras for them. And this is the first time I'm hearing that Samsung make screens and whatever for Apple. But Apple like to try and create the myth that they are the genus of all ideas, that pure invention comes only sort of blessed by the sweat of Jobs' brow, that no other company could possibly do that. So But the thing with these large companies is they've got that many different lawsuits and different partnerships and different departments going on. I could quite conceivably see 2 meetings taking place at the same time in Samsung's offices. In one meeting, one conference room, they'll have the Apple lawyers and the Samsung lawyers battling it out over patent infringements. And then next door, served by the same tea trolley on the same tea round by the same assistants, they'll go into another meeting and find lawyers from Apple and from Samsung working quite happily on some new partnership agreement.
Roy, I don't know if you have any other comments you want to make on the set.
One of the things I wasn't too sure about, and hopefully Rusty can fill me in on it. He seems to be very knowledgeable about this whole case, but is Apple actually aiming to remove the product from the market, or do they want to try and persuade Samsung to pay some money to Apple?
I think at this point they're after getting Samsung to pay money as opposed to trying to ban the product from market, both for PR reasons and other things. Basically, their claim is the same claim they've been making against everybody else. Your Android UI looks too much like iOS, which is a laughable claim at best. But basically, it's Apple wants to claim they invented this. And
when I look at Apple's iOS, and I did use it before on other people's phones, and the first thing I think is this is like my Palm Pilot, as before, with the icons and everything on the main page, and the way you activate the application to put them down. And some people would come and say, well, that's more like the Newton. And then you have to really go back and see who used these interfaces in the first place. And it's an endless thing, because everyone's being inspired by someone. And I think it was Steve Jobs who said something like, we've always been shameless about stealing great ideas. And he would use the word steal. And they actually say, well, we take great pride in the fact we look at what other people do and we just steal it.
Well, and the real problem here is the patent office is not doing their job, because they're allowing these endlessly open-ended patents, which basically cover any way. Basically, if you're pushing your finger to a touch screen, you violated the patent. It's like if you're interacting with the technology in any way you'd interact with the technology, you're violating the UI patent. And this really is a complete 180 the patent office and trademark and copyright stuff has done in the last 30 years. Because 20 years, sorry. Back in the 80s, this is actually what the ruling was on the Apple versus Microsoft, Xerox versus Microsoft and Apple, was that a UI or interface is not patentable or copyrightable. It's the way you do it. The code can be, but the user experience isn't.
I'm not sure the code can be. That's get copyrights on it. You could claim that if the code is very similar, you might make a claim this person was copying my code and trying to obfuscate something. But the thing is, I think with hardware in general, people say there are lots of lawsuits to do with phones these days, and especially the mobile market is completely entangled by this thing they call the patent thicket. But what actually happens, I think, is because computers don't tend to be very much bundled with an operating system, so you can actually remove that and change more things. It's easier to claim damages per sale of a phone if the phone comes with a certain operating system with some software embedded onto it. And it's easier to do that than to say, well, to a project like VLC, you have to pay us per download or something. It's hard to quantify how many people use that, and how many copies of VLC, supposedly they sell, which of course they don't. They just let people download the thing. And even if you sell proprietary software, you can kind of make it a downloadable thing. And these companies, they see the potential of just counting how many phones you sell. In the case of Google, you're talking about activations at the order of I think it's now 350,000 a day. And they think this is a good potential to take even $1 from each activation. That's like a third of $1 million.
Well, no, and that's the thing. Apple's business model for iOS was built on basically having predominance, which it's very clear they're not going to have. And unless they figure out a way to get some money out of it, in some ways, this is Apple doing what Microsoft did. They're like, you owe us for a Windows license, whether you bought one or not, and that's kind of what Apple's trying to do here, because they're not going after Google, because they can't afford to sue Google. They're going after everybody who's distributing Google. And much
Yeah,
like when
also
you
there is the incentive to defend. Of course, Google will be willing to spend more defending Android. In the case of Samsung, they can actually in this case, unlike usually with the Microsoft lawsuits, you can say the reason they